The pen was already in her hand when she looked up. The boardroom was silent. 22 people around a table the length of a small aircraft, all of them watching her. Lawyers in charcoal suits. Investors with their hands folded. Junior executives who had never met her before today and had no idea, not a single clue, who she actually was. And at the far end of the table, Damien. He was watching her too. She had not seen his face in 3 years. 3 years, for months, and 11 days, to be exact. Not that she had been counting. She had simply stopped needing to. But now here he was, and she could see it immediately. The slight loosening around his jaw, the way his collar sat half a centimeter too tight because he had gained weight from stress, the faint darkness beneath his eyes that no amount of sleep could correct. She had lived beside that face for 12 years. She knew every version of it, and the version sitting across from her now was something she had never seen on him before. He was afraid. She lowered the pen slowly, placed it flat on the table. And then she smiled, just barely, just enough, and said nothing. Because Liora Bennett had learned, in the hardest possible way, that the most powerful thing a person can do is make someone wait. She had learned it from him. It was a Thursday morning in October when everything ended. The air outside the courthouse smelled like wet stone and exhaust fumes. Liora had worn a navy dress because her attorney said it projected stability. She had done her hair carefully, kept her jewelry modest, and rehearsed in the mirror that morning the expression of someone who was holding it together. She was not holding it together. She had not been holding it together for 6 months, since the night she found the emails on Damien's laptop, left open on the kitchen counter like a careless invitation. The emails were not from a stranger. They were from Priya Nair, 31. Vice President of Strategy at Bennett Group. The company Liora had spent 12 years helping to build from a 2-person operation in a rented office above a restaurant into a 40-employee firm with 7-figure contracts. One email said, "She's been living inside my life so long she forgot to build one of her own." Liora read that line 4 times. Then she closed the laptop, made a cup of tea she didn't drink, and sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up. She did not cry that night. She was too busy thinking. 6 months later, inside the courthouse, Damien's team of 3 attorneys presented a financial picture that made Liora look like a supporting character in her own marriage. Every asset had been structured carefully. Accounts moved. Properties retitled. The company's founding records, which Liora had personally organized and filed in the earliest years, now showed her role as administrative support. Not co-founder, not operational partner, not the woman who had managed the books for 4 years without a salary while Damien networked and pitched and took the credit. Administrative support. Her attorney told her the settlement was the best they could do under the circumstances. As if the circumstances had not been manufactured, document by document, over years. The day the divorce was finalized, Damien found her on the courthouse steps. He stood close enough that only she could hear him and said, in a voice that was almost gentle, "You'll never survive without me." It was not a threat. That was the worst part. It was a statement of fact, delivered with something close to pity, as if 12 years of watching her work, think, manage, and carry had taught him nothing about who she actually was. She looked at him for one long moment. Then she picked up her bag, walked down the steps, and got into a cab. She did not respond. Not because she had nothing to say, because she was already thinking about what came next. The studio apartment smelled like old carpet and other people's cooking. The heating was unreliable. The window looked out onto a brick wall with a painted-over door that had probably not opened in 20 years. Liora stood in the center of the empty room with her single suitcase and thought, this is where it starts. She gave herself 2 weeks to fall apart. No judgment, no performance of recovery. She ordered cheap food and cried at things that had nothing to do with Damien and everything to do with loss, because grief doesn't stay inside the shape of its cause. It spreads. But on the 15th day, she opened her laptop, and she started working. She enrolled in 2 online certification courses simultaneously: financial operations management and business process consulting. She studied at night after 12-hour shifts at a hotel front desk. She worked weekends doing bookkeeping for a dry cleaner owned by a 70-year-old Ghanaian woman named Mrs. Asani, who paid her in cash and told her every Saturday, without fail, "You have a serious mind. A serious mind does not stay still." Mrs. Asani gave her a referral. That referral became a client. That client told a friend. That friend owned a logistics company. Word spread the way it always does when the work is real. Quietly, through trust, person to person, without advertising or performance. Within 14 months, Liora had registered her firm. She named it Clarity Consulting Group. Not after herself, after the things she provided. She answered emails at 5 in the morning. She returned calls the same day. She showed up exactly when she said she would and delivered exactly what she promised. In her industry, that alone was a form of revolution. Within 3 years, Clarity Consulting Group was worth millions. Meanwhile, across the city, Damien's empire was quietly unraveling. The affair ended badly. Priya stayed at Bennett Group, but she did not stay with Damien, and the breakup left him with the particular wound of a man who had destroyed his marriage for something that didn't want him back. He made 3 large investments the following year. 2 failed. A major client representing 20% of his revenue left when he missed a deadline Liora, in previous years, would never have allowed to slip. He hired someone to replace her, then another someone, then an entire project management firm. None of them worked the same way, because none of them had 12 years of institutional memory, and none of them had learned to anticipate him the way she had. He was losing altitude, slowly, then faster. Into this landscape came Arc Tourist Capital, a mid-sized private investment group known for acquiring undervalued mid-market companies and restructuring them without destroying them. Surgeons, not raiders. Liora had been introduced to Arcturus 18 months earlier through a consulting engagement that went exceptionally well. They had asked her to join as a senior operational advisor. That role came with equity, not a lot, but some. Enough. She had not known, at the time, that Bennett Group was on their acquisition list. That information was confidential until a deal reached a certain stage. And by the time it did, by the time the documents were drawn and the boardroom was reserved, it was too late for anyone to rearrange the guest list. He had no idea she was coming. Or at least, that was what she allowed everyone to believe. This is where Marcus Webb enters the story. Marcus had been Liora's attorney for 18 months. Before that, he had been a junior associate at the firm that handled her divorce. Never her attorney, never someone she'd spoken to directly. Just a young lawyer in the background of a difficult day who had looked at the settlement documents with an expression she had never forgotten. Not sympathy, something sharper, something that looked like recognition. 2 years later, she looked him up. Marcus was now a partner specializing in what he called financial architecture disputes, cases where a business had been deliberately structured to erase the contributions or ownership rights of certain parties. Most of his clients were people who had been, in one way or another, architecturally erased. He had been looking at Bennett Group's founding documents for reasons entirely unrelated to Liora when he found it. A discrepancy. Small, subtle, invisible unless you knew what you were looking for. In the original operating agreement, there was a reference to a cooperator, unnamed, described in language that implied equity participation contingent on the company reaching a specific revenue threshold. That threshold had been crossed in the company's 3rd year. The equity had never been issued. Or rather, it had been issued, then quietly restructured in an amendment filed 8 months before Damien initiated divorce proceedings. The amendment reclassified the cooperator's role as non-equity administrative staff and backdated the change using a notarization date that Marcus cross-referenced against 3 other documents and found to be off by 47 days. 47 days. The kind of detail that vanishes in a large document review. The kind a team of well-paid lawyers, moving quickly, might never catch. Marcus had caught it. When Liora sat across from him and laid out 12 years of her life in 2 hours, Marcus listened with the stillness of a man who already knew most of the answer. Then he opened a folder and showed her the discrepancy. She looked at it for a long time without speaking. "What are my options?" she finally said. "Civil court," Marcus said. 2 to 3 years, very public, uncertain outcome. Damien has resources to fight it. He paused. Or you wait. You find a moment when the leverage is different. You're saying wait until he's vulnerable. I'm saying a signature from you, in the right context, is worth more than any court judgment. A judgment can be appealed. A negotiated settlement cannot. She sat with that for 3 days. Then she called Arcturus. She had not engineered the Bennett Group acquisition. She needed to be clear about that, even in the privacy of her own mind. She had not gone looking for Damien's company. She had not pushed Arcturus toward it. The deal had been in motion before she joined their advisory board, driven by numbers and market logic that had nothing to do with her personal history. What she had done, the only deliberate thing, was not asked to be removed from the deal team when she found out. That was all. She stayed. This was not revenge. She needed to be clear about that too. Revenge is emotional. It burns things down. This was correction. Precise, legal, and long overdue. And Liora had spent 3 years becoming a woman who dealt in precision, not fire. She arrived at the Arcturus boardroom at 8:47 a.m. She wore a dark charcoal blazer, ivory blouse, no jewelry except small gold earrings. She looked, deliberately, like a woman who had come to work and not to win, because the difference is visible, and the latter puts people on guard too early. She took her seat midway down the right side of the table, not at the head, not at the far end, midway, with a clear sight line to both doors. Her leather portfolio contained 2 sets of documents. The standard acquisition materials sat on top. The second set, the one she had prepared with Marcus over 90 minutes that morning, lay underneath, face down, unseen. At 9:02, the far door opened. Damien walked in. He sat down without looking up, reading something on his phone. Then someone beside him spoke, and Damien raised his head and saw her. The change crossed his face in less than a second. Recognition, shock, the rapid suppression of both. The professional mask came down. His expression resettled into something measured and composed. But his hand closed slightly around his pen. Liora noticed. She smiled once, the brief, neutral smile of a professional acquaintance, then looked down at her portfolio and let him sit with it. For the next 6 hours, he would have to perform competence and stability in front of his investors while that uncertainty grew inside him like a crack in a wall. Invisible from the outside, structural on the inside. If you have ever given years of your life to building something alongside someone, only to watch them take everything and leave you with nothing, this story is for you. Not because it promises revenge, because it promises something truer, that the qualities they dismissed in you are exactly the ones that will outlast everything they built without you. At 12:30, Diana called a lunch break. Liora was speaking with Thomas, one of the other investors, quiet and precise, when she sensed Damien approaching. She finished her thought with Thomas, then turned. Damien stood at professional distance, but his voice was careful in a way that professional conversations aren't. Liora, Damien, I didn't know you'd be part of this. Small industry, she said, picking up her portfolio. The salmon on the side table is excellent. She turned to leave. Liora. His voice shifted, less controlled now. Can we speak privately? This afternoon. 15 minutes. She considered him for exactly long enough to make the consideration visible. 4 o'clock. The small conference room at the end of the east corridor. Then she walked to the elevator, rode to the lobby, found a quiet corner, and called Marcus. He wants to talk. Expected. When? 4 o'clock. Good. That gives him time to get anxious. A pause. Are you ready for this part? She looked out at the street below. Ordinary life moving through its ordinary afternoon. I'm exactly as okay as I need to be, she said. He was already in the conference room when she arrived at 3:58. Damien had always arrived early when he needed something. Punctuality, for him, was never courtesy. It was positioning. She set her portfolio on the table and chose a chair that was angled, neither confrontational nor aligned. The geometry of neither enemy nor ally. He opened with, "You look well." Too personal. Too casual. She watched him recalibrate. "I am well," she said. "What did you want to discuss?" "I want to be honest with you." She waited. "I made mistakes. During the divorce. I was not the person I should have been." The words were correct. But beneath them she heard what she had always heard beneath his words. A man doing trioff. Not confession. Calculation. "I appreciate you saying that," she said evenly. "The acquisition matters," he said. "For the company. For 63 employees who made none of the decisions I made. If this deal falls through, you're asking me to sign." "Yes." "And framing it around the employees." A beat. "They're real people, Liora." "They are," she agreed. "They were also real people when you were restructuring the founding documents 3 months before filing for divorce." She said it the way you state a fact. No heat. No tremor. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. "I don't know what you're—" "You don't have to," she said calmly. "I'm not asking you to confirm it. I'm letting you know that I know." She stood and picked up her portfolio. "That's all for today." At the door, she paused. "What are you going to do?" His voice, behind her, had changed entirely, stripped of its professional register, exposed. She turned and let him see something in her face for the first time. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. "Tomorrow morning, we finish the meeting," she said. "And then we'll see." She left the door open behind her. She didn't sleep well that night. She had expected that. The body remembers proximity to old pain regardless of how far the mind has traveled. She lay in the dark and let herself feel the full weight of 12 years. And then, at some point before 3 in the morning, she set it down. Not because it didn't matter, because carrying it into tomorrow was a choice she refused to make. At 7, Marcus arrived with coffee and documents and the stillness of someone who understood that calm was its own strategy. They reviewed the materials for 90 minutes. The core documents were precise and layered. The original operating agreement, the cooperator clause, the equity threshold that had been crossed and never honored, the amended filing, the forensic accounting report, and a personal email from Damien to his own attorney that referenced the cooperator clause in language that proved he had always known it existed. "How do you want to present it?" Marcus asked. "Not as an accusation, as a fact." "And your ask?" "Restitution of the original equity stake, calculated at current valuation." She paused. "Which, given the Arcturus acquisition, is substantial," Marcus said. "And if he refuses?" "Then we file. And everything we have becomes part of the public record of a civil suit against the person Arcturus is about to acquire." Marcus looked at her steadily. "He'll sign." "I know." She moved to the window. The city was doing what cities do, moving forward, indifferent to individual reckoning. There are 63 people at Bennett Group. The acquisition is a good deal. If it goes through, the company stabilizes and those people keep their jobs. Then we proceed. We restore what was taken, she said quietly. In the room, in front of everyone who needs to see it. And then we let the company survive. Marcus was quiet a moment. "That's more generous than he deserves." "Probably." She turned back from the window. But I'm not doing it for him. The afternoon session opened normally. Signatures moved around the table. When Diana gathered the final pages and said, "I believe that concludes," Liora said, "One moment." The room turned. She opened her portfolio. She removed the second folder and placed it on the table in front of her. Open, face up, with the same unhurried precision she brought to everything. "Before we close," she said, "I need to bring a matter of corporate record to the attention of all stakeholders. It affects the ownership structure of Bennett Group and, by extension, the terms of this acquisition." She walked through it methodically. The founding documents, the cooperator clause, the revenue threshold, the equity that should have vested, the amended filing and its 47-day inconsistency, the forensic report. She used no dramatic language. She did not characterize intentions. She did not look at Damien. She let the documents speak. The room went silent in the particular way rooms do when information is rearranging everyone's understanding of something important. Lawyers straightened. Investors leaned forward. Diana's expression behind her red glasses was unreadable and completely focused. When she finished, she closed the folder. Damien was looking at her, not with the anger or rapid calculation she had expected. Something older. Something that had been sitting beneath every version of his face she had ever known. The version before success, before ambition took the shape of ruthlessness, before he had convinced himself that her contribution was administrative and his was essential. He looked like a man who had been caught, not by her, by the arithmetic of what he had actually done, laid out plainly under fluorescent light. Diana spoke carefully. "Mr. Bennett, I'll need to suspend proceedings until our legal team reviews these documents." One of his attorneys leaned in, urgent and low. Damien didn't look at him. He was still looking at Liora. And then, slowly, he turned to his lawyer and said, "Tell them it's real." "Damien, tell them," he said quietly, "that it's real." For words. And the room changed around them. The proceedings were suspended for 36 hours. Arcturus's legal team reviewed everything. An independent auditor was brought in. Marcus filed formal notice of claim with the full evidence portfolio. Damien's attorneys spent those 36 hours calculating. On the morning of the third day, they reached out. The negotiation took 7 hours. The final agreement restored Liora's founding equity retroactively, calculated at current pre-acquisition valuation, a figure substantial enough to restructure the ownership distribution of the deal. The acquisition would still proceed. Bennett Group would survive. 63 people would keep their jobs, and Liora Bennett would receive what had always been hers. The signing happened in a small room. Just lawyers and principals. No audience. No theater. She had not wanted theater. She had wanted accuracy. Damien signed his documents steadily, without delay. She gave him that. He did not flinch or stall or search for an exit. He had made his calculation and arrived at acceptance. When the pages were moved to her side, she read every one, because 12 years had taught her never to sign anything without reading it. And she had paid for that lesson once and would not pay again. Then she signed. Every page. When it was done, Damien set his pen down and looked across the table at her. "I believed what I said," he said. "On the courthouse steps. I actually believed you wouldn't make it." She held his gaze. "I know you did," she said. He was quiet. "Then, I was wrong. Not the careful, calculated version from the conference room 2 days before. Something smaller and more real. A man looking directly at the evidence of his most consequential mistake and naming it plainly." "Yes," she said. "You were." She gathered her documents and nodded to Marcus. At the door, she paused, not because it was planned, but because she had nothing left to prove and could therefore afford to be plain. She turned back one last time. "The company will be okay," she said. "Your people will be okay." He looked at her across the small room. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once. Then she walked out. 3 weeks later, Liora signed the final acquisition documents. The deal was covered in 2 industry publications as a routine mid-market transaction. Nobody wrote about the equity restitution or the 47-day discrepancy. The settlement was confidential, and Liora preferred it that way. She was not interested in the story of what had been done to her. She was interested in the story of what she had done with it. She moved Clarity Consulting Group into larger offices that autumn. She hired 3 consultants and an operations manager. Mrs. Asani called on a Saturday, the way she always did, and Liora laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere uncomplicated, and said yes. Things are good. Things are genuinely good. She still got up at 5. Still returned calls the same day. Still showed up exactly when she said she would. These were not the habits of a woman who had survived. They were the habits of a woman who had chosen, deliberately and at great cost, to build something real. One Tuesday evening in November, she sat at her desk and looked at the city at dusk, the particular amber light of a sky moving toward night. And she thought about the courthouse steps and a single suitcase and the brick wall outside the studio window, and the 15 days she had given herself to fall apart before she began. She thought about all of it. Then she picked up the next document, uncapped her pen, and got back to work. The pen had been in her hand for a long time. She had not spent 3 years counting toward this moment. She had been counting forward, toward the next client, the next problem, the next thing worth building. But here it was anyway, arrived with the quiet inevitability of something that was always going to happen. She set the pen down. She looked up, and she smiled. Not for him, for herself, for the woman in the studio apartment who had chosen, in the dark, to start. For every person who has ever been told they will not survive, who has sat with that sentence and felt its weight, and decided, quietly, without announcement, not to let it be true. This was never about a signature. This was about knowing who you were before someone told you that you weren't, and spending 3 years, for months, and 11 days proving it. Not to him, not to the world, but to the only person whose opinion ever mattered. Herself. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to this channel for more and share it with someone who needs it. And if you're somewhere in the middle right now, in the part that looks like an ending, keep building. The room you'll walk into one day doesn't exist yet, but it will. And when you arrive, you'll be ready.